Hello and welcome to my humble abode. So for today's video, I'm finally going to talk about how I was able to get a house as an artist working in Los Angeles. But funny enough, when I first got this townhome in Los Angeles, I was also unemployed at that time. It was a bit of a wild time because that was also during COVID, but that's why I'm here to tell you about how I was able to get through all of that, especially as somebody who's working an untraditional career. First off, I think that we're living in a day and age where people in society are becoming a little bit more accepting of artists and people who take on untraditional career paths, because people who have creative careers are notorious for being called starving artists. I'll never forget about the guy that I heard said,
I know of this girl who went to this art school and, she's probably just gonna end up at Starbucks.
And first of all, if you want to work at Starbucks, all the power to you, that's great. But second of all, I hate when people use this as a sort of condescending thing, being like, oh, all artists just go to school and just don't, make anything out of their careers. Please tell me that every person who has entered a traditional career path has just stuck with it, because otherwise why are there so many of them leaving now to become content creators? But anyway, just to get some backstory as to how we even landed on this decision to eventually get a home, was that first my boyfriend and I just decided that, we were gonna want to eventually move in together, and if we did, we preferred to buy a place because ultimately renting in LA is not cheap. So thankfully between us in the beginning, I would say my boyfriend was more of the finance guy, but I would say that he eventually inspired me to get into it as well. So eventually I learned a lot about buying a home, real estate. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, talked to a lot of lenders and real estate agents and just other people on their process of buying a home. And this was also during 2020, where it seemed like this might be the prime time to buy a home because interest rates at that time were only 3.25%. And because everybody was working from home due to COVID, it didn't seem like people needed to be in a certain location for work. So we thought that this would be a perfect time to take advantage of that opportunity. Previously, I was living in an apartment in Burbank, and the cost of that, which was a lot smaller than this home, obviously, and a lot less upgraded than this home, it was around $2,300 plus a month for a one bedroom for one person. Now with this place, we both pay around $1,200 per person, which means that the mortgage of just living here per month is around $2,400. And that is pretty much almost the same cost as my apartment, except here we have 2 stories, it's around 1,200 square feet, and we were able to make a lot of renovations and upgrades to this place so that if we eventually sell it one day, hopefully it will be worth more than what we bought it for. So hopefully that intro provided some context behind why we got a home, but next let's move on to getting the home. So the hardest part about buying a home is most likely going to be collecting the money for the down payment, because this is the most amount of money that you will probably have to spend. Unless if you have the cash just fully up and ready to pay for the whole house, then forget what I'm talking about. But for the most part, you may have to pay a down payment for your home, and usually a solid amount is 20%. So this is obviously going to be easier if you're going into this with a significant other, or if you have a sibling or somebody that you really trust that you're going to go through this journey of purchasing property with. And there are also programs out there like a first-time home buyer loan, which can help some people, although that's kind of additional money that you would still have to pay back. But for us, we personally did not go with one because we chose a place that we were able to afford the down payment of. So ultimately the down payment is really going to be depending on the cost of the house that you choose. Our home was also more of a fixer-upper, which helped with lowering the price. And most of the money that I accumulated to contribute to my portion of the down payment was from my previous jobs working in animation. I've taken on a lot of internships and other jobs. I've also done a lot of freelances, commissions. I also had my grad graphic novel book deal, Patreon, Etsy, Gumroad, sponsorships, and more. So honestly, I would definitely say that a lot of this couldn't have been possible without the fact that I started a lot of things that were really generating income in the beginning of my art career. And I will say that my graphic novel book deal was the one thing that really allowed that to be possible, because if you do land on a good book deal, that could potentially be a 5-figure advance payment that could go back into you investing into yourself in whatever way, shape, or form. And for me, I chose a home. And despite the fact that I worked a lot of different jobs, especially during my college and beginning of my career, I also had to learn how to smartly invest these things. So of course, when you start working in an animation union, they're going to go in and tell you all of the benefits about joining the union, such as being able to open a 401k, which helps you save for retirement. So just from the beginning, after you work like a certain amount of time to be eligible to become a member, you'll eventually be able to contribute to your 401k, which allows you to set money aside so you know what money is left for you to work with that you can reinvest in somewhere else, like a home. So other places that I put my money during this time was in a high yield savings account, so that you get a higher interest rate in getting money back per month just for leaving your money in a certain savings account. And I also opened an individual brokerage account, a Roth IRA, and a regular IRA. So setting money aside in these other investments can help you know how much money you have left that you can spend and choose to invest in property. And of course, it's really up to you if you want to choose to invest in things like stocks or retirement. I think it's a good plan to have because you never know what's going to happen in the future. But for me to determine how much I could afford in a down payment, I had to first just look at how much money I had available liquid. So that was just primarily from my high yield savings account and any of the money I would be generating from my work. So I did not have to pull out from any form of retirement. So basically, this is kind of the fun part because you can kind of brainstorm and see what your options are. So for me, I specifically needed to be in a place that is still accessible to the animation industry, because ironically, by the time we started looking for homes, that was when COVID happened. So when we were all working from home, it was almost like we weren't sure if there was going to be a need to be close to the studio. However, I still just liked being in the general Los Angeles Valley. So yeah, call me a Valley girl, I guess. But in general, that was the area my boyfriend and I were interested in purchasing from. And if you are somebody who is working in the animation industry or want to just be in the center of entertainment industry stuff, illustration, comics, or more, really your best bets and locations to look for are anywhere here in the Valley, the West Side, and maybe sometimes here in the East Side, although most people I know generally live in these areas. So next, you're gonna have to think about your mortgage, because this is the amount you're going to be paying per month. So instead of your rent, now usually it's going to be your mortgage, which is how much you're going to be paying, which you can find out how much you're able to afford using any mortgage calculator out there. Usually the sites like Zillow and Redfin already offer a calculator, but you can also seek other ones out there. And honestly, I will say this is when we came in really lucky, because when we were first looking for a home to buy, we weren't even really sure if this was the right decision for us to make financially, and we weren't sure if interest rates at that time were going to be the best we could get. But seeing that we're here like 3 years later and interest rates are around like 7%, I'm really glad that we took on that opportunity back then when we were contemplating, because our interest rates were around 3.25% in 2020. So I don't know the next time it would be something that's low, but that's something you would definitely have to consider for when you get a home. Of course, you can always refinance later, but just know that you might have to fork up a lot of money per month, with a lot of it going to interest if you're paying monthly for things that you can't afford. But usually this is why you kind of go through the process of your lender deciding if this decision is going to work for you or not. So during this stage, we also had to get pre-qualified before we even started house hunting. And I think that this was because of COVID during this time. I don't know if they're doing this anymore nowadays, because now I think you can just walk into a home and just browse without a pre-qualification. But in 2020, we needed to get pre-qualified so people would assess our finances finances and see if, we're even eligible to look at this house, if we're even able to afford it. But that's not the same thing as getting pre-approved, where the actual lender who is going to loan you the money is going to determine if they feel that you are suitable to loan this money for this home for. And the pre-approval process is actually where my whole art career thing kind of added some drama to the situation, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And also, before you get to the house hunting portion of this, you're going to have to, of course, find a real estate agent eventually. I personally don't know of anyone who got a home without an agent, unless if you know the buyer and you just can talk to the buyer just like that. But for the most part, if you're house hunting and just gonna land on this random home, for the most part, having a real estate agent will be really helpful. Honestly, I kind of thought of it and paralleled it to my book because I have a literary agent, but a real estate agent helps you with homes instead of books. And when you are going to buy a house, there are going to be a lot of terms, a lot of legalities, things that you don't understand that a real estate agent is going to help you with. And of course, they do take a commission of whatever the house sells for, but at least assuming that you land on the right agent, they will be in this to help you. And I'm really glad that we landed on a really honest, straight to the point guy. So it's just really important to get a real estate agent that can be totally honest with you and isn't just using you as a way to get a quick buck. So next, the fun part is house hunting, which is, I feel like, every artist's favorite part about the home buying process, because this is where you get to fantasize and daydream about what your day-to-day life looks like, where you're gonna be working, sleeping, eating, and creating this new life for yourself. So the way that you're gonna stumble across homes is usually gonna be based on what your real estate agent finds and recommends for you, and what you find based off of your own searches online. And I will say that this is the time to really pay attention to what you are looking for in a home. I would really suggest journaling this down or writing it down so that you can remember these things. Like for me, here were just some of my suggestions for my personal things that I'm looking for in a home. Was at least 2 stories of a townhouse, because I don't expect us to just be able to get a single family home right from the get-go here. And if we did, it would usually be in a non-preferable neighborhood. So yeah, 2 stories, because I just also don't want any neighbors beneath me, and I want this to feel like my house, and I don't want people to complain about me walking and breathing. Then it was really important for us to have a separate office room, which is the room that I'm in right now. This was actually originally the master bedroom, but we changed it to the office because we're gonna spend more of our days working and being conscious, whereas when we sleep, we just need a place to sleep. So we kept the smaller room for our bedroom because we really don't need a lot of space just to sleep. And also having in-unit laundry is very important, because I just don't want to have to go out and wash my clothes and dry my clothes and have to walk back and forth outside and inside just to retrieve them. And it was also, of course, important for this place to be bigger than my previous apartment, because my previous apartment was definitely overpriced for what was included in the unit. And if this is a home that I'm going to be putting a down payment in and living in for a longer time than I did in my apartment, I needed to have more space for me. But at the same time, it was also very important for this home to not be something that we would just be blowing all of our money off on, because at the same time, this is a home that we want to stay in for a somewhat longer time, but it's not our forever home either. So we still want to be able to have some savings to do other things in life, like travel, live, eat well, and take care of ourselves. But yeah, ultimately, I would say that when you look for your new place as an artist, it's just really important to really envision what your working life is going to look like, because I truly believe that your environment has some sort of correlation with your creativity and the way that you work. And I feel like if you're in a space that doesn't really inspire you, you're not really going to be always putting in your best work. So if you are able to get a home, of course, think about how you are going to lay it out in a way that will work for you creatively as well. But just the fact that, in a home you can just decorate it and do whatever you want to it was very liberating for me because in my previous apartment, I couldn't do anything like change the walls, put anything on the walls, unless if I wanted to pay for a deposit in the end or I had to fix everything up before I left it. And sure, I might have to do the same for this place if I move out, is I might have to start fixing up things again, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm being fined or being punished for what I'm doing. The next is making your offer. So this is the part where we hit our first bump in the road because we saw a townhouse that we really liked that was in a really nice neighborhood, and we were like, this is the one, you know, this is the worst house in the best neighborhood type of situation, and that was what we were always told that we should look for. But however, we were not able to get that house because we were not able to get pre-approved, all because of me. I was actually in a position where I was ending a job at Netflix at this time, and I was waiting for around 2 to 3 months until I started a new project at Tonko House, which ultimately became Oni Thunder God's Tale. So there was going to be a 2 to 3 month gap period where I would not be eligible to purchase a home because I did not have any sort of stable income to show for during that time period. And I was ending a job, and because of that, they wanted to see what I was going to be doing for the next 2 to 3 months, but I did not have any job lined up. So the lender at that time obviously said that he could not approve us because I was working a traditionally unstable career during COVID when things are already getting more unstable due to this pandemic. And because I didn't even sign an official contract that I was definitely going to start at Tonko House yet, I was not able to just get pre-approved without that as some sort of documented proof. And on top of that, I did not have enough credit history or diversity to really show that, you know, I could be someone that is trusted. And honestly, I've never had any problems with paying payments on time whatsoever, but however, the longevity of how long you had your credit cards open for or any other lines of credit really do affect how you're going to be seen to people who will be loaning to you. So while I did know that opening a credit card was going to be really important as a young adult, at the same time, I didn't know that you were going to need so many of them. Well, you don't need like that many of them, but you just need like maybe a good 1 to 3. So at this time, of course, I was only like 23 to 24, and I did not have many credit cards open in this lifetime because prior to this, I was just really focusing on school. So that was the moment that kind of initiated me to really play hard on the credit card game and try to open a few more credit cards. Of course, while doing the proper research and knowing which ones were the best fit for me, and as someone that really likes to travel, I ended up choosing cards that gave me a lot of travel benefits and that I could accumulate points to eventually travel. So what ended up happening was I eventually did find a short-term animation job to fill in that 2 to 3 month gap period. It wasn't my favorite project, but I just did it to just make that transition more seamless to get our home. And we ended up parting ways with that lender because we ended up just not really getting the best vibes from him. He didn't feel like that supportive, and he also just was kind of demeaning at times, so we just did not enjoy our time talking to him. So we found another lender who was able to work with us, and after I landed that gap period gig, I was able to eventually get pre-approved because I was able to show that I'm working a job now. And during that time period, I did also eventually get the contract to prove that I was going to start at Tonko House. So that's how we were able to get approved. So this is the part that I think is going to be really important for nomadic creatives or anyone who's in a project-driven industry or even just working creatively or freelancing, is going to be letters of explanation. So this is just for exaggeration purposes. You don't actually need to send in letters, at least that was not my experience. It was all through an online portal that we had to send to our lender. But what is going to happen throughout this process is you will be able to answer any questions that the lender might have for you, and this is your chance to like prove yourself that you're legit and that you're going to be responsible and pay things on time and that you are who you say you are, because they will send you a lot of emails asking you about, you know, certain payments or certain pay stubs or certain places that you previously lived before. And they also asked a lot of things for me regarding the animation union and like what union I was a part of. So that's going to be really important if you're going to be in an art industry. They might ask you a lot of questions about your jobs, prior employers and future employers, and they might even call your current employer to confirm that you work there. So I feel like this is going to be more important for artists, because if you've worked multiple projects, they may question that, and this is your time to word things in a way that it will benefit you, while of course still being honest. So during this stage, I will say, while it is tedious, it is the part that helps you, but you do have to collect a lot of documents, files, take screenshots of all of your bank statements, your previous tax documents, how much money you have in total, and all of these things you're gonna have to like prepare for. Like, I would say a lot of my time during this stage was just collecting documents. So after you make your offer, assuming that the seller approves your offer, you'll then move into this process called escrow, which is what we did. And for us, it lasted for around 30 days. I think some other places may take a little bit more than that, or I don't know, but for us, we had 1 month to basically figure out the inspector who's gonna appraise our home, figure out house insurance, and also just negotiate anything in the contract that the seller should pay for, because, you know, what if they're selling a home to you that has this major repair that needs to be done that might fall on your shoulders? You want to see if you can at least get them to fix it first. So overall, I would say escrow is kind of like the process of this time chunk they're giving you to go through the processes of closing on this house, like finally deciding if this is the house that you want. So yeah, during this stage, you can also back out if you really feel like you need to. So the major things that you would probably have to be planning for in this stage is planning the home inspector, planning the appraiser, and maybe getting home insurance, although I don't know if you should do this before or after, but I think lenders prefer for you to have it prior. But one important thing I will say is to definitely make sure the inspector for your home is not somebody that the seller just recommended for you. Because basically what happens is, if the seller is the person who is recommending the inspector for you, there's a chance that there could be some under the table business where they've talked to each other and the seller is trying to say things like, you know, I'm trying to sell my home, but there's this major issue that I'm afraid might make it not be able to sell, and the inspector might leave it out only for you to deal with that problem later. You don't want to go through that, so just make sure that the inspector you find is someone that you just found on your own and has no bias towards this home or the seller. And for us personally, we had an issue with our fireplace because it's basically unusable and the insides have just been so destroyed because of the rain. So we basically have a rain cap that was removed from the top of our fireplace, which ultimately rusted the entirety of the inside. So we hired like multiple fireplace inspectors or chimney inspectors. I think we got like 2 to 3 of them to look at it, and it was always a mixture of, yeah, you should get it replaced and this is how much it's gonna cost, or you can just leave it alone and do nothing. So ultimately for us, we had no plans of really ever using our fireplace other than just leaving it as a decorative piece. So this was one of the points of contention in which we were trying to get the seller to pay for the repairs of the fireplace and the chimney, but they refused. So we ultimately just decided to not pay for any of the repairs because we have no plans to use it whatsoever, and it's just going to be left as a decorative piece. And all we did was install a new rain cap on the top of the fireplace so that no further damage from the outer world can be done to it. So I will say the whole negotiating aspect with the seller of trying to get them to repair things before we moved in was, you know, not the best. Like, they were pretty stingy and didn't want to do anything because they kind of probably felt that, hey, my place is gonna sell regardless, so they just didn't care if they had to pay for anything. So the reason why we moved on with the home anyway was just because the repairs were for more minor things. There was nothing too big of an issue other than the fireplace and ultimately this was a place within our price range at that time, and there was a lot of potential that we were able to do with it because it was a 2-story townhome. Then also we had someone come over to appraise the property, which is just the person who comes and makes sure that, you know, this property is what it was worth as listed on Zillow or Redfin or wherever you got the price from. So for the most part, if your home was listed for what it was appraised at, there should really be no consequences. Otherwise, if your home gets appraised a little bit lower than what it's listed as, there's a chance your lender could be a little bit more distrusting and not be willing to lend you as much. But it really depends, again, on who your lender is and who your appraiser is and the type of property that you're looking at. So then lastly, we had to close on the house, which basically is kind of like the process of formalizing the end of the escrow process. So yeah, there are closing costs that may be associated with you closing on your home. And this is again going to be determined based on how much you're putting down and how much your home is worth. So it's going to be different for everyone. But this is also the point where you pretty much make your payment and wire over your down payment. So for this part, I would highly recommend for you to just go to your bank in person and do the wiring in person so that, you know, you have all of the information, you know who did the transaction, and you have a form of a receipt to just document this process in case if anything goes wrong, because there are cases where people have accidentally sent their money to the wrong bank, and you know, you never know if you're going to get it back. And there are a lot of mistakes that can be made if you don't do this part carefully, because that's the part where a lot of money can be lost if it gets sent to God knows where. But for the most part, nothing should happen as long as you go through a trustworthy bank, and especially if you go to them in person. So then lastly is home renovations. So finally, after we closed on the home, we were able to move in, but there were still a lot of things to fix up about this place. So this townhouse was originally like kind of an old 70s style place, and nothing has really changed about it since the seller got it. So we had to do a lot of things like ripping out the carpet and replacing the hardwood floors ourselves, which then later got damaged from the rain. But then we got our home insurance to help us fix that, as well as the HOA, which is something that you're going to have to look into based on your property if you're going to have an HOA on yours, which allowed us to help fix our porch, which was the source of the rain damage. We also did install recessed lighting for our home so that we had more lighting available, because in all of my previous apartments I just had a lamp as my main lighting source. And as for furniture, I would honestly say Facebook Marketplace comes in clutch. I will say if you live in a major city like Los Angeles or New York, there are some pretty good options there, although I will say Los Angeles has more trendy options, and honestly it's a great way to just not produce as much waste. And the thing that I honestly really like about Facebook Marketplace is you don't have to assemble half the furniture that you get, because it's already built. All you have to do is just transfer it to your home. So I would just say Facebook Marketplace was really good for, you know, things like tables, media stands, bookshelves, but things for like couches and stuff, I of course bought on my own, because you just never know when you're inheriting a couch from someone like what might be in there. So we mainly just renovated the dining room, living room, office, and bedroom. And as for the bathrooms, we kind of like did some light renovation. However, they weren't like terrible. I still don't really prefer that they are an old 70s style, but we're kind of just evaluating things as we go and live here and see if they're necessary, because again, we don't really plan to live here forever. So it's just, we'll see what happens. So honestly, that's pretty much how we got our house. I feel like us renovating our house is a whole different story. So let me know if you would like to see a video on the changes we did, how we renovated and decorated. And if so, I'll happily make a video on that too. So if you would like more videos like these where I kind of talk about like the living aspect of being an artist and doing these things that really I don't see many artists talk about, please let me know in the comments below. If you are an artist or someone working in a creative industry, I would love to hear about your home buying process. How did it go for you? What country or state you live in? Because for me, I was originally from New York, and I heard about a lot of these rules in New York, but I'm now in California, so there are a lot of things that really depend on the state that you live in. So It's just a really interesting process, but I also think it's a very rewarding one because as an artist, yeah, I do think that it's a pretty big deal if you are able to purchase a home, but for me, the most important thing was just creating a space that I felt comfortable in and felt like I could be creative and just feel more free than I did in my apartment. I couldn't have done this without all of you. I honestly feel like I am here and able to be a homeowner because of things like my graphic novel, my YouTube channel, and my Instagram, which wouldn't have existed without the help of all of you. That's why I love doing videos like these, where hopefully the knowledge that I share can help you out so that you can eventually make your own informed decisions to whatever you want to do with your life as an artist. So yeah, thank you again, and I will see you all in the next one.